I'm either trying to find an ambulance or the closest hospital, please.
We have the latest now on the 3 innocent people killed in a mass shooting at the Naval Air Station near Pensacola yesterday morning. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis says the shooter was a member of the Saudi military who was in aviation training at the base. Escambia County Sheriff's officials shot and killed that suspected shooter. Now, the FBI is confirming the gunman's identity as Mohammed al-Shamrani. Another 8 people were hurt in that devastating shooting, and it is being investigated as a terrorist attack. The FBI, though, says there is no credible threat toward Pensacola at this time.
Hey, what's up, guys? I got a story coming out of the Florida Bulldog about the 2019 Naval Station Pensacola shooting that was carried out by an individual within the Royal Saudi Air Force named Mohammed Zaid al-Shamrani, in which 8 people were injured and 4 people were killed. And the story was written by, again, Dan Christensen, who's one of the best up-to-date beat reporters regarding anything relating to 9/11 attacks or religious fundamentalism happening inside the country. So without further ado, let's go to the article. As you can see, this was published May 14th, 2023. Pensacola lawsuit seeking to hold Saudi Arabia accountable for deadly terrorist attack should be tossed, U.S. magistrate says. The families of 3 murdered U.S. Navy servicemen and 8 others wounded when a Saudi Air Force officer with significant ties to al-Qaeda opened fire at Naval Air Station Pensacola in 2019 cannot sue the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for damages, a federal magistrate ruled Thursday. Well, that sounds quite familiar about what the Southern District of New York initially claimed regarding the lawsuit purported by Creedler and Creedler, which representing 9/11 victims' families. The judge at the Southern District of New York at the time, Judge George Daniels, basically stymied any civil lawsuit purported by the 9/11 victims' families, but reversed that decision about, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, actually. Magistrate Zachary Bolito explained his decision in a 64-page report and recommendation of Pensacola U.S. District Judge Margaret Rogers, who will now make the final call on whether to grant Saudi Arabia's motion to dismiss the case against it. And I'm hoping there's some sort of public backlash to this, and whatever law firm is representing the United States here. Lawyers for Saudi Arabia invoked the U.S. Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act to assert the claim that that as a foreign nation, it is beyond the jurisdiction of just courts. Magistrate Bolito agreed. Royal Saudi Air Force Second Lieutenant Mohammed al-Shamrani was stationed at Pensacola to complete training from the U.S. military under a security cooperation and education program on December 6, 2019. At 6:42 a.m., al-Shamrani walked into Building 633, used to train aviators since World War II in uniform, carrying a 9mm handgun and ammunition in his flight bag. He quickly pulled the gun and began shooting, chanting Allah Akbar, an Islamic phrase meaning God is great, throughout the attack across 2 floors of classrooms. Killed were Ensign Joshua Caleb Watson of Coffee, Alabama, Airman Cameron Scott Walters, Richmond Hill, Georgia, and Airman Mohammed Hatham, St. Petersburg, Florida. Wounded were Airman George Johnson, Ensign Brianna Thomas, Airman Ryan Blackwell, Jessica Pickett, and Ensign Christy Lerner. 3 law enforcement officers were also wounded in a brief gun battle before al-Shamrani was shot and killed. According to the magistrate's report, Saudi Arabia immediately denounced al-Shamrani's actions, and the FBI investigated with the kingdom's complete and total support. Al-Shamrani's cell phone soon revealed his significant ties to al-Qaeda. The U.S. Navy also investigated, issuing a 267-page report declaring that the self-radicalization of al-Shamrani was the primary cause of the attack and that no one person or organization knew or could have known of the killer's plan to attack. How would they know unless it's a foreign entity who was helping him planning this attack? And of course, if it's al-Qaeda, you could bet your rear that either this is coming from just probably three countries. It's either Saudi Arabia, Yemen, or Pakistan. And I doubt it's Pakistan here, but the biggest countries that are behind the creation and logistical support, and I don't know too much about financial anymore, but they used to be, was Saudi Arabia and Yemen. There could be some support in North Africa, but the al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula are not known for international attacks. That would be either Afghanistan, Pakistan, or Saudi Arabia. The magistrate's report says investigators also determined that just before the attack, al-Shamrani used Twitter to send a series of anti-American messages that included the following: I hate you because every day you supporting, funding, and committing crimes not only against Muslims, but also humanity. I am against evil, and America as a whole has turned into a nation of evil. The report notes without comment the plaintiff's allegation that the Saudi officers supervising al-Shamrani knew he'd be carrying a handgun on base, something that violated both U.S. and Royal Saudi Arabian Air Force policy, yet took no action. Further, it recounts other allegations by the plaintiffs. First, that a month before the attack, al-Shamrani and other Royal Saudi Air Force trainees made an unauthorized visit, the 9/11 memorial in New York City, where the plaintiffs alleged they praised the 9/11 hijackers and discussed plans for launching the Pensacola attack. Second, that at dinner the night before the attack, al-Shamrani and other Saudi trainees discussed plans to attack the next morning. Magistrate Bolito, that's him right there, however, discounted these allegations, writing that both the U.S. Navy and the FBI concluded that none of the other Saudi trainees were aware of the planned attack. His report, that based on the FBI's probe, which conducted that the al-Shamrani's attack was motivated by his jihadist ideology. Then Attorney General William Barr announced that there was no evidence of assistance or pre-knowledge of the attack by other Saudi Air Force members training in the U.S. Now, hey, that's pretty ironic because wasn't it William Barr who basically said, I'm not releasing any more classified information regarding Saudi Arabia with the 9/11 attacks, citing national security privilege? Yes, it was that same William Barr. And he said that to the 9/11 victims' families represented by Creedler and Motley Rice. He did this under the Trump administration, even though Trump basically pledged his allegiance to the 9/11 victims' families, and the law firms stated that he would release it. So whether Barr acted on his own, I don't know. Nearly 36 survivors and family members of the deceased filed a 172-page complaint alleging that al-Shamrani was a Trojan horse sent by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and ex-proxy al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Ooh, interesting. Under the auspices of a program tied to billions of dollars in military arms sales from the United States to Saudi Arabia, the report says. Interesting. Now, al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula are not known for international attacks. They're usually local. They usually stay in the Arabian Peninsula, North Africa. Boko Haram, I'm drawing a blank about the other group that's al-Qaeda affiliated, not Abu Sayyaf, As-Sabab. These are groups that are in the Arabian Peninsula, North Africa. And of course, you have al-Qaeda affiliates in Libya and, of course, in Yemen. So there's in Iraq. I mean, we basically never see international attacks anymore. So 2019 was usually an anomaly. But I'm going to get into that in a minute about al-Shamrani's contacts, if you will. And I think that the victims' families in this Pensacola attack do have a legitimate complaint regarding affiliates inside Saudi Arabia, but not within the government so much, but within the religious sector. And I'd like to talk about that in a minute after I read this article, because we're supposed to see a reformation under the Salman family, King Salman, who is basically a mummy at this point, and his son, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who's going to take over the country and who basically is under pressure from the State Department under the Trump administration and now Biden to basically curtail any religious fundamentalist activities because it hurts business. And if it hurts business, you're hurting the people that are offering you military protection in the country. That's what the United States does. And also that the United States regulates the oil market in return. Plaintiffs argued that the federal courts has jurisdiction over Saudi Arabia based on several exceptions to the U.S. Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, including the exception provided for by Congress when it passed over President Obama's veto, the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act, also known as JASTA, in 2016, in part to allow suits against Saudi Arabia for the September 11 attacks, in which Obama was not rather vocal about. Indeed, JASTA's passage resurrected a massive ongoing New York civil lawsuit against Saudi Arabia brought by 9/11 victims. But Magistrate Bolito, applying Florida law, determined that al-Shamrani was not acting within the scope of his employment when he attacked. Well, I mean, think of it this way. If he was not acting within the scope of his employment as a Royal Saudi Air Force officer, well, he used that employment to deceive, to basically act out on an act of terrorism. Whether he acted under good faith as a Saudi royal officer, I think is irrelevant. He used that position. He was a legitimate Saudi royal officer. Have plaintiffs produced evidence showing that al-Shamrani's terrorist attack was a type of conduct Saudi Arabia employed him to perform? Do I need to say anything more? Look at the human rights abuses over the decades regarding Saudi Arabia and what they do to dissidents. A great example would be the recent family Salman line. And what they did in 2016? When they blackmailed and held hostage the Nayef family, and also who was supposed to be the legitimate heirs, and also any dissidents or potential dissidents, and that they had to swear loyalty to Prince Salman while financially stealing from them. Their answer is no. Saudi Arabia employed al-Shamrani to serve its national defense by flying airplanes and operating weapon systems as a member of its air force. It is undisputed that the U.S. is one of Saudi Arabia's most important military allies, Bolito wrote. Either Bolito really is ignorant about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and al-Qaeda in general, or he does know about this and is willing to basically ignore it. Plaintiffs have not sufficiently shown that jeopardizing an important strategic relationship, not so much of a strategic relationship. Again, this is a falsehood. This is basically about oil. Let's be honest here. We're friends with Saudi Arabia because we can regulate the oil market instead of competing world powers like China, Russia, and our coalition partners if they ever get the wrong idea, like France or Great Britain. By causing a disastrous diplomatic incident was within al-Shamrani's job description. Excuse me. While it may not have been disputed in court, it is common knowledge that the numerous public officials disagree with the magistrate's assessment, that's obvious, of the kingdom's relationship with the U.S., including Florida's former Democratic Senator Bob Grant, because Bob Grant was the co-chair of the Joint House Inquiry, and he investigated Saudi Arabian intelligence links with the 9/11 attacks and where 9/11, most of them, 9/11 operators came from, Saudi Arabia. It was Saudi Arabian intelligence that provided logistical and funding support to two known al-Qaeda operatives inside the United States, Khalid al-Badr and Nawaf al-Hazmi, who went on to hijack American Airlines Flight 37 that crashed in the Pentagon. The CIA knew about them here. The NSA knew about them here. Saudi intelligence knew about them here. Israeli intelligence knew about them here. And they never told the FBI or the State Department about this. Further, the magistrate also ruled that the plaintiff's contention that Saudi Arabia acted with negligence and gross negligence in its vetting, retaining, and supervising of al-Shamrani also failed because there are claims based on the kingdom's omissions. And the JASTA exception provides that a foreign state shall not be subject to the jurisdiction of the courts of the United States under JASTA on the basis of an omission of a tortious act or acts that constitute mere negligence. Plaintiffs have provided vague, conclusory, and substantiated allegations of indirect support by Saudi Arabia. What the court has before it is insufficient to support a finding that the Saudi Arabian government provided matter of support to terrorism, and that support proximately caused the Pensacola attack. That is correct. Look, the defendants in this case are basically trying to circumvent the JASTA Act and basically say it doesn't apply to a foreign nation because that foreign nation, Saudi Arabia, doesn't fall under U.S. civil law. This is a civil lawsuit. And so now let me talk about al-Shamrani's links to what I think could help the case. And I'm sure the law firms know about this too, because they have information that I'm not privy to. I'm just reading public information. Now, Shamrani, again, was a member of the Royal Saudi Air Force, and he grew up in southern Saudi Arabia at a home that was considered observant but not strict. And this would describe a lot of the muscle hijackers too in 9/11. And at approximately in 2015, al-Shamrani began following notable Saudi hardline clerics, people who teach the Wahhabi ideology that helped to create Saudi Arabia in the first place. People like clerics like Abdul Aziz al-Tafriri and Ibrahim al-Sakran, both who were imprisoned by the Saudi government in 2016, as well as clerics from other countries like Jordan and Kuwait. Al-Shamrani reportedly made his first contact with the al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula in 2015, though the circumstances are really unclear, but this is coming from Saudi intelligence. And they knew about, listen, Saudi intelligence knows which of its military or its high-profile residents or people within the country are joining these Wahhabi groups, these Salafi organizations like al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Boko Haram or Abu Sayyaf, or Jemaah Islamiyah in Indonesia. They know who these people are, because it's not like these people act out and are acting in the shadows. They're out in the open. They keep documentation about who's in these groups. For example, al-Qaeda would have people join its ranks. They would swear loyalty to bin Laden, and they would basically write an application. But the application basically was who this person was, where he grew up, what his skills are, and so that they could put him in the right selection, whether to be trained under its military wing, under its Shura Council, which is the religious wing, under its media wing, or to act as a martyr, self-suicide. There's a lot of committees within a group like al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda Arabian Peninsula is much like any other military establishment in the world. They have different wings for different skill sets. It's not some ragtag bunch that you're led to believe from the State Department. They'll basically say, oh, these guys, they're half-wits. Yeah, some of them are. They basically are illiterate, which is the reason why these clerics take advantage of them in the first place. And they don't know how to read the Quran. You ever notice that there's a link between hardline religious people? With the United States, it's usually evangelical Christians, and they don't read the Bible. They are read to them, the Bible, by fanatics, like the recently deceased Pat Robertson, or like Kenneth Copeland, or Benny Hinn, or Creflo Dollar. And if you want to go, To the south, Baptists, these like, hardline Catholics, these people are basically very unaware of what's read to them in the Bible because it's being read to them, selected passages. And then those pastors basically decipher what it means. And these people just eat it up and they believe it. Well, you just described what the Salafi tradition is. Salafists basically don't read the Quran. What they do is they read the Hadiths, which are memoirs of certain imams and clerics, self-appointed imams and clerics that lived after Muhammad. So these are words attributed to Muhammad, but he never said them. Or he said them, but they're misinterpreted. Now, one of these people who basically was a Hadith scholar and is responsible for the creation of Wahhabism is Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah basically was a Hadith scholar that basically attributed words to the Prophet Muhammad and talked about how there's a desecration of graves, that shouldn't be, no one should be worshiping at the grave of Muhammad, and that foreign Muslims should not be inside Mecca and Medina. There's a lot of these crazy attributes. And you had this one person named Muhammad ibn al-Wahhab who basically learned from the teachings of Ibn Muhammad and created his own group with Ibn Saud to create the Emirate of Diriyah. And with this, you have this creation of Saudi Arabia. And Muhammad ibn Saud and Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab, where Saud would provide the military wing of this country, and Wahhab would be in charge of the religious indoctrination of its citizens and military. And this still exists today. You have the royal family, the kingdom, which is made up of approximately anywhere between 5,000 to 7,000, nobody knows the real number, that are coming from 7 male lineages, which are called the Sudari 7. These are the 7 sons of the original founder, Ibn Saud, who created Saudi Arabia when he captured Hijaz and Najd. Okay? The Emirate of Diriyah was the initial name of Saudi Arabia, which was created by Wahhab and Saud. Later on, Ibn Saud captured those cities, then renamed it to Saudi Arabia, right? But that coexistence still exists today. It didn't, talk about reformation, no such thing. You have a large military presence, which are basically inept. That's why the United States is there. And also, you have a religious sector within the country that are basically ignored by the kingdom, but not powerless. There's very strong religious presence inside the country. Even today, even under the strict presence of al-Salman, who got rid of like the religious police because he wanted to appease his masters or his benefactors, the United States. And also another reason, the United States also sells more weapons to Saudi Arabia than any country in the world. That's another thing. No country on the face of the earth buys more American military products than Saudi Arabia. But let's go back to al-Rahmani. Rahmani was one of only 2 students that was chosen from the academy to train the United States. Now remember, here's a guy 4 years prior to the Pensacola shooting that was radicalized by known Saudi clerics in the kingdom, and that the Saudi government knew about these 2 and arrested them anyway. He arrived in the United States in August of 2017 on a diplomatic visa and was scheduled to complete his training in the summer of 2020. And Rahmani was one of more than 850 Saudi officers training in the United States at the time. And like all foreign officers training in the United States, Rahmani was vetted for his links to terrorism, and a criminal history before he could start his training. And there was a New York Times investigation in the summer of June, July of 2020, that found that Rahmani had passed multiple background checks when he joined the Saudi military and then trained in the United States, including by the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia, the State Department, the Pentagon. And he had passed these background checks, which don't mean anything really. I mean, background checks became more stricter after 9/11 attacks, but I mean, could he have flown under the radar? Possible. Sure. He could have kept it secret. I mean, what if Saudi intelligence really didn't know? What if U.S. intelligence really didn't know? We have to play that card, right? So that just to be careful at the same time. We don't want to start incriminating without evidence. The United States bolstered its internal military background checks since and I forgot, that's right, they bolstered their since the 2009 Fort Hood shooting. And then we had the oh man, that shooting in the Naval Yard. I forgot where it was, and that happened like a couple of years after the Fort Hood shooting. And according to media reports, the increased focused primarily, and this is really ironic, the increase focused on vetting U.S. citizens, not foreign military students training in United States. I mean, you can't make this up, folks. Sure, we got to watch out for U.S. citizens because they might be the biggest terror targets against military outposts or sensitive targets in the U.S. Oh, let's not investigate anybody from Saudi Arabia. Oh, they're just behind Fort Hood shooting, the bombing of the USS Cole, through their proxies in Yemen, 9/11. Come on. I mean, at this point, we're just, it's a joke. And then when Rahmani completed his language training, because he learned English, not Rahmani, al-Shamrani, he transferred to the Naval Station in Pensacola. And there was a complaint made by al-Shamrani, too, in April 2019. He filed a complaint against one of his instructors, James Day, who gave him the nickname Porn Stash. And you see the picture I'm using in the avatar. It is a porn stash. I mean, yeah. But if you're a Wahhabi, you are against porn, right? Notice I'm quoting because it's hypocritical. Wahhabis are hypocrites. They watch porn. In fact, it's alleged that Muhammad Atta, Mohammed al-Sheikh, went to a strip joint in Florida. And so did Khalid al-Mihdhar, the Wahhabi, right? Who knows? But Wahhabis are hypocrites. They don't follow any tenets of Islam. If they did, they wouldn't be Wahhabis. And look, I could go on and on and on about al-Shamrani and his radicalization in Saudi Arabia and how Saudi intelligence basically either ignored this part of al-Shamrani's life. They may well not have known. But then, like I said, a year later, those two clerics basically were arrested, Abdulaziz al-Tarif and Ibrahim al-Sakram. And Tarif basically is he called himself an Islamic teacher. He was actually born in Kuwait, and he can recite from memory numerous hadiths, basically. And like I said, he's known, most of these Salafi teachers are hadith scholars. They're not Quranic scholars. Because nowhere in the Quran basically does it say to kill people, because in the book of Al-Baqarah, it basically says, or Bashra, I could be wrong, I think it's Al-Baqarah, where it basically says from the Arabic, whoever kills one life, it's as if he kills all of mankind. But whoever saves one life, it's as if he has saved mankind. And that's also in the Talmud, which Israeli settlers are similar to Salafis. These are radical, nut jobs that think that Israel was given to them by God and that they could kill Palestinians and take their land because it was God-oriented. Because in the Old Testament, God destroyed what the Hittites, the Hashemites, the Hittites, the Amalekites, considered them the enemy. Killed all the livestock. There's no saving. So these people basically are ignorant when it comes to the Talmud. They probably read from the Jewish Encyclopedia. But yeah, I mean, you have this scholar al-Tarif, who's known for his violent tendencies. He even was arrested because when he was arrested because he had a Twitter account where he just basically called out for violence against polytheists and dissidents, against Salafis in general. So good on Dan Christensen again for bringing this to attention. I think the magistrate got it wrong, obviously, and I'm hoping that Florida and maybe Governor DeSantis, I'm gonna hold my breath, can basically exert some pressure and basically reverse this order, or have the other judge who I named before, Margaret Rogers, to basically reverse the order of Bolito, so they could sue the King of Saudi Arabia, which is what I'm hoping for with Creedler and Creedler. I mean, now after the Canestraro documents, we now have evidence that Saudi intelligence were inside the United States and knew about Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, knew they were al-Qaeda. The only thing we don't know is whether they knew that they were going to plan the 9/11 attacks. We don't know that, but we do have at least Saudi intelligence who are linked to Saudi government inside the United States, running an illegal operation with the CIA. So I'm hoping that the Southern District of New York and Florida magistrate Bolito can basically just ignore the pressure from the State Department, which is enormous, because they're using the FBI to do this, to exert pressure on the law firms and these judicial courts to not allow for victims of people who were killed by these Salafi terrorists who have basically been radicalized in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and reverse this order and sue the living hell out of them. Because we got to have some justice for some of these terrorist attacks. And it makes you wonder why the United States is allied with such a reprehensible criminal country like Saudi Arabia in the first place.